News Channel 8 presents New Skills for Living with your host, Tom Lavin, a healthy plan for healthy living.
Hello and welcome to New Skills for Living, a show dedicated to healing and wholeness in our community today. We've got a good show today as we continue on with our series about addiction and recovery. And in today's show, we're going to focus on women in addiction and recovery. We've got two really good guests today. Our first guest is Shannon Peterson. Shannon is a certified alcohol and drug counselor, and she's the clinical director at Step 2. And with Shannon today, we're going to focus specifically on women's issues of addiction and recovery. And Shannon, it's great to have you here as our guest. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Shannon, I guess one of the first things that I'd like to ask you is, some people say that there's a difference between treating men and treating women in recovery from addiction. Can you share with us your perspective on that?
Certainly. There is a pretty significant difference in treating women than men. Women tend to look at themselves in terms of relationships. So they label themselves as a mother, a sister, a wife, things like that. So when you're treating a woman, it's really important that you deal with it holistically and address all of those relationships. Women generally are the primary caregivers for the children or sick family members. So it's really difficult to get them into a treatment setting without providing that extra support with those relationships. Also, women tend to use primarily with their partners. So if a woman's going to come into treatment, it's important that the partner also does as well.
Yeah, or it may cause even greater problems if the partner does not get in recovery. Huh?
Right. If she were to change everything about her life and then go home to this same environment, she's most likely going to relapse because nothing else has changed except for her.
Yeah. So given those differences then in terms of women, relationships being so important to a woman and identifying herself in that kind of a way, how have you at Step 2 kind of designed treatment to respond to the needs of that recovering alcoholic or drug-addicted woman?
Our entire program is focused on the woman and her family. So we work a lot on child care, on prenatal care, postnatal care. We have some evidence-based practices that we implement there as well. In terms of depression, anxiety, trauma, which a lot of women in substance abuse also experience, we have marriage and family therapists. We also do Seeking Safety, which is also a evidence-based practice.
Yeah, oh, that's great. That's great. And then it sounds like, as you're describing that, you have a number of modalities, different types of therapies that you offer to the women. Could you describe those, Shannon?
Sure. Our marriage and family therapist specializes in victim services and trauma interventions, and so she's really able to help women who are either in a state of crises or, if they're having things come up as they become more clean and sober and their mind's clear. We also have an excellent relationship with Dr. Kohlenberg, where we're getting to practice some ACT techniques around mindful eating and things like that.
Oh, that's wonderful. And then, do you have individual counseling?
Yes.
And then you have group therapy.
Individual counseling, every client has a primary counselor.
Oh, great.
We also have residential treatment, intensive outpatient and outpatient treatment, so they can easily receive up to 35 hours of treatment a week. Yeah. We also have individual and marriage and family sessions with the therapist. Yeah.
And so the family, is the family invited into treatment as well?
For sessions, absolutely. We really like to incorporate them as much as possible. A lot of the treatment needs to be individualized as well and focus on what those individual women's needs are, but we always try to look at those relationships, since that's really how the woman is going to get better, as if the whole family does.
Yeah. And so as you're individualizing this, I guess, do you have a variety of ages of women? And
Any adult woman 18 and older, and most commonly in their 30s, maybe 35, 40s, but generally, actually we've had one person who came in right after she graduated high school. We've had a couple who their grandchildren come, because those are the important people in their personal relationships. So any age range.
And I guess a woman's relationship with herself, in other words, her self-esteem and her self-love, You probably address that as well too, huh?
Absolutely. One of the most important things is if she does not love herself, she's not fully capable of loving her children or husband or partners as much as she would really like to. So it's really important that she gets healthy and learns to love herself and be happy with who she is.
Well, that's really great. It sounds like you guys are really delivering a strong, holistic, systemic kind of program for the women. And we're going to go ahead and take a break right now, Shannon, but right after this brief break, we're going to continue hearing about the wonderful work they're doing at Step 2. Hello, and welcome back to New Skills for Living as we continue to take a look at our theme of addiction and recovery. You'll see up on your screen the website, www.easeap.com. And this interview with Shannon Peterson and our next guest, Diene Dixon, as well as all the other New Skills for Living guests, can be seen on that website on streaming video. So you might want to go to the website to watch this show again or let your family members and friends know about it. Also, I want to show you this example of a newsletter. There are over 80 newsletters up on the website dealing with forgiveness, depression, anxiety, recovery from addictive disorders, healthy relationships. If you go to the website, you'll be able to view the newsletters. You can also copy them and send them to your friends. It's a service of my psychotherapy practice to the community, so please take advantage of that if you would like to. So, Shannon, when I was looking through your outline for what we might talk about today, as we're talking about women in recovery from addiction, you did mention that there's an important role of hormones in treatment. Could you describe that for us, please?
Sure, absolutely. There's quite a bit of emerging research about the role of estrogen with women and its links with dopamine. So when a woman is using, during the first 2 weeks of her menstrual cycle, her estrogen is quite high. And so that increases the dopamine, increasing her subjective high. During the second 2 weeks, it drops dramatically, so the woman will not be able to get that same level of high as she was during the first 2 weeks. So during that time, she's actually going to end up using more, hoping for that same feeling. Then with the introduction of all those extra chemicals, her body is going to become physically dependent quite a bit faster.
Wow.
So also when she gets into early recovery, it's important that she realizes during that last 2 weeks, again, of her cycle, the dopamine and estrogen are dropping. So she's likely going to be a little bit more cranky, more than the standard PMS symptoms. So it's really important that she be around safe people and not in high-risk situations.
Yes, and be able to deal with those feelings as well as some of the physiological aspects. And so you started to describe that, but can you tell us a little bit more, like, in terms of having a recovery community where it's all women supporting and helping each other and sharing with each other, can you describe to us the power and the importance of that milieu?
Absolutely. Women tend to do significantly better in treatment if it's a women-only setting. If it's in a setting with men, like I mentioned earlier, women focus a lot on their relationships, so they may be embarrassed to talk about sex or hormones or parenting issues, sexual dysfunction, things like that, because they're afraid probably of what the men in the room are going to think or label her. So in a women-specific setting, it's more open and free to talk about those things without the judgment. Women also tend to be very afraid to come into treatment if they're pregnant, because they get the idea that if I tell somebody I have a problem, they're going to take my babies. And so they have a hard time coming in and admitting use during pregnancy or during parenting, and so it's really important to have that safe and warm environment.
Oh yeah, I really like what you're describing, you know, the environment that's safe and warm and encouraging and empowering too, huh?
Absolutely.
That's great. Now, of course, the other data that you showed me that's really quite disturbing is that recent 2009 statistics show that out of the number of people that were admitted into treatment centers, I think it was 34%.
Right.
So 34% were women. Now, of course, it's about half and half in terms of men and women who are having problems with alcohol and methamphetamine, heroin, marijuana, but it's only 1/3 of the treatment population are women.
Right.
That's called barriers to treatment, isn't it? Can you talk with us about barriers to treatment, Shannon?
Sure. And like I had mentioned, the relationships being a primary issue, if a woman is the primary caregiver for her children, it's really difficult for her to get out of the home and get into treatment. If she has a mother who's maybe sick or dying, that's her primary commitment, and kind of what society tells us as our role of women is to be the caretakers. Other parts that contribute to that is domestic violence is really impactful for women. Either they're afraid to leave the home, they cannot physically leave the home, or they don't want to go out and be seen because then somebody might see bruises or marks. And the fear oftentimes with domestic violence is that if I tell somebody, they're going to tell me I have to leave, and I can't leave yet. And so there's a lot of things that really interfere with women's ability to get into treatment. If women are generally at home taking care of the children, they don't have the financial means either to pay for treatment or to get into treatment.
Shannon, in these two segments, you gave us a really nice overview of the barriers to treatment and the specific types of treatment issues that women have. And of course, we have a really good impression of Step 2 and the work that you as the clinical director and your staff are doing there at Step 2 to help the women and their children.
Thank you.
And we'll hope to have you back at another time to tell us more about that.
Sure.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right, Shannon. And then right after this brief break, we're going to have Diene Dixon, who's the CEO of Step 2, come and talk with us some more about women in recovery. Hello and welcome back to New Skills for Living. Our next guest is Diene Dixon, and Diene is the Chief Executive Officer of Step 2, which is a therapeutic community that serves women and children suffering with addictive disorders. Diene, it's really great to have you back at the show. Thank you for coming. All right.
Thanks for having me back.
So, I've been hearing about the growing that Step 2's been doing in fulfilling its mission of helping women and children affected by addictive disorders. Can you tell us the kind of growing you've been doing, how your programs and your facilities are expanding?
Well, Tom, it's pretty exciting. We've got a lot of stuff going on at Step 2. Obviously, the need continues to grow.
Yeah.
There continues to be more women and children that are in need, battling the substance abuse issues out there in our own community. We've just almost completed a new family counseling center. It's just under 15,000 square feet, and it's been a task. It's been a fun adventure, and it will allow us to expand our outpatient services as well as consolidate all of our already existing services under one roof.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. It's pretty exciting.
So you're talking about existing services and new services. Would you kind of go through those and describe those to us so we have a good idea of the way that you're serving women and children in our community?
Sure. Yeah, our services are a little bit different than a typical traditional treatment program in that when the women come into, usually Coronado is our first mode of treatment that they'll come into. They receive treatment for 10 to 12 hours a day. It's pretty intense during the daytime.
And that's a residential facility?
And that's in the residential facility.
Okay.
And so now those services will be received over at the new Family Counseling Center throughout the day. And it includes different types of groups. There are individuals as well. We've got some outside volunteers that come in and they will give us, they'll provide parenting classes or financial or nutritional classes. Those will be coupled with the services we already had up at our Lighthouse campus.
I see. Okay. So there's the residential facility. Now, tell us about Lighthouse. What Step 2 do at Lighthouse?
Lighthouse, for the last number of years, has been our flagship program. Lighthouse is comprised of 25 cottages. There are 1, 2, and 3 bedroom cottages, and it depends on the size of the family, is the size of cottage that they'll move into. Our women will stay up there from anywhere from 8 to 15 months on average. While they're there, they'll continue to receive counseling services. It's after the residential services. It's less intense. While we're helping them find suitable and gainful employment, helping them with their child care, just until they can get on their feet and they start moving along. And it's really that middle step before taking off and becoming productive members of the community again.
Now, am I understanding you correctly that the woman is there with her child or her children?
Absolutely. Now, not all the women in our program have children, but for those that do, many of them have them in their custody, and some of them are working on the reunification. We'll help them with that process. And once the women are reunited with their kids, or actually even before, we'll move them into a unit that is has enough size for their children to come back.
Yeah.
And it gives them an opportunity to practice their own living skills and parenting skills in a safe environment.
Dennis, what do the women tell you about that experience, about being able to be there on your campus in a safe, encouraging place and have their children there with them and receiving treatment and expanding their lives? What do they tell you?
They are extremely grateful, and particularly those women that are very successful. They recognize that it is a safe environment. It gives them an opportunity to practice many skills and receive feedback from their counselors or other auxiliary Step 2 staff. And really, it's almost like being a kid again and having parents, and then just working your way up towards that freedom before stepping out.
That's great. That is really such a rare program nationally. To have that available for women in our community is just and children is amazing.
It is. We're blessed to be able to have it. And one of the great things about the program is we fully furnish the cottages based off of all the donations we receive from everyone in the community.
Yeah.
And when a woman successfully completes the program, she takes all of those belongings with her.
That is fantastic. I mean, it really is a community-based program. Very quickly, we've got about a half minute here. You have an intensive outpatient program then, as well as outpatient counseling.
We do.
Is that correct?
That's correct. And we try to keep the women with their counselors. They stay in contact with their counselors as they transition through. But it's a great program.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's great continuum of services there at Step 2. After this brief break, we're going to continue to talk with Dias. Hello, welcome back, and thank you for joining us as we continue to talk about addiction recovery with our guest right now, Diene Dixon from Step 2. So, Dias, multicultural counseling is kind of a fancy name for maybe the idea of treating each individual person for who they are with dignity and respect is kind of what comes to my mind. But can you tell us from your perspective in the treatment field, when we talk about multicultural counseling, what do you mean by that?
Well, Tom, I think that it's really important for everyone to understand the importance of the different types of backgrounds that people come from.
Yeah.
And I think to start, most of the time, most interactions are multicultural. Because even if you're the same race, ethnicity, or gender, you probably still have some significant cultural differences from the person that you're sitting across from. One of the most important things that I like to tell people is that they really need to understand who they are, you know, where they come from. What is your cultural background? You know, why? It'll help you understand why you think what you think.
Yes.
And it also will help you understand some preconceived notions you might have about particular individuals or groups, and can help significantly in the counseling process.
Yeah. And of course, why that's important now, when I learned back in 1974 and 75 the basics of addiction counseling, back in that day, it was one size fits all.
Right.
And so multicultural counseling kind of goes against that idea of one size fits all, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
It does. It breaks it down into the concept of time, anything from eye contact to posture to language.
Yes.
And even within the United States, we still speak a number of different dialects of English. It also takes into consideration what the client or consumer might be bringing to the table and trying to evaluate and figure out, allow them to paint the picture of what their culture's like.
Yeah. So that, I mean, I'll just throw out a few ideas, and then why don't you just throw out a few too, so that, like if someone has been brought up in a certain religion, where they're fundamentalist or evangelical or Roman Catholic or Jewish, their addiction, the way they practice their addiction and their recovery could really be influenced to a degree by those ideas of guilt and shame and relationship and spirituality and existential issues, and just as an example, huh?
That's a wonderful example, because oftentimes individuals may, depending on what the religious background might be, to tap into what a person is really thinking, what they're really feeling, sometimes you have to go through the higher power.
Yes.
Sometimes they may be holding on to that guilt, feeling so bad because of the way they were brought up. And for a counselor or therapist to dig deep into those issues to get started is going to only help them paint a better picture.
And I think it's important for people to know, just like Shannon in the first couple of segments was talking about, the importance of women being together, and it is important for women to be in treatment together. However, I'm hearing that you treat each woman as an individual person too.
Right.
Knowing there are these like cross-cultural dynamics, but each person is an individual person, and you probably assess each person individually then. Can you tell us a little bit about the assessment process?
We have to, yes.
Yeah.
Usually with the assessment process, we like to know where they're from. That always helps. And what type of environment they grew up in. Was it a single parent? Were there two parents? Is there a history of addiction in the family? All of these things feed into the cultural concept. One of the biggest fears is, because we have all women, is we just assume that, okay, they're all women. Or you have all these African-American women, oh, they're an African-American women, that we have a cookie-cutter approach because she is like this woman number two, and that can be a pitfall in itself.
Yeah, sure.
So we really like to get a clear picture. We have one assessment coordinator who takes care of all the assessments at step 2. She then takes it to the clinical team and will do a pretty thorough breakdown as to what's going on and what cultural relevance might be implied in the therapeutic process.
And of course, the main thing that's so great for me to hear about your assessment coordinator and how you approach this is it makes treatment more effective. The person feels dignified, they feel respected, and kind of, I guess, one of the core skills of empathy, you're meeting the person where they're at, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're not just a number.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. We've got about a half minute, Diaz. For someone, maybe we've got about a quarter of a minute. For someone who has a mom or a sister or a spouse, a woman in their life who's having problems with alcohol or drugs, real quick, what would you say to them?
I would say, first, ask them, let them define what the problem is, and secondly, call step 2.
Call step 2 and find out where to get some help.
Absolutely. We can
Diaz, it's been great to have you back on the show. It's great to hear from you and Shannon about step 2 and the good work that you're doing in the community. I think up on your screen there'll probably be some information again so that you can watch this interview with Diene Dixon and Shannon Peterson about step 2. Let people know about it. We'll see you next month as we continue to take a look at addiction and recovery. Take good care of yourself.